Hey, what's going on, guys? So, as of right now, at this moment in time, there have been 3 live service superhero games that have come and gone, them being Marvel's Avengers, Gotham Knights, and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And all 3 of them have failed spectacularly. And it's funny, because on paper, the games as a service model was tailor-made for superheroes.
What you talking about, Willis?
Now, before you start smacking on that keyboard about the Arkham games and the Insomniac Spider-Man games, look, I get it, I hear you, and I know that in the past, the best comic book superhero simulators have been story-driven, self-contained, interactive experiences that were either open-world sandbox games, level-based beat-em-ups, or action RPGs, or just straight-up fighting games. And those are all cool, and those are all fun. But look at it like this. What does every live service game feature? Again, on paper. Solo play with the option of playing online with friends. You have raids, looting, crafting, gear systems, upgrading your player to take on higher level threats, fighting waves of enemy factions with different enemy types with the same boss over and over and over again. What does that sound like to you?
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Okay, but on a serious note, that to me sounds like reading superhero comics. You have solo adventures, but there's also team-ups. Superheroes ambush supervillain hideouts and reverse engineer their weaponry to build specialized costumes and gadgets to take them down later. And it's always the same rotation of bad guys, because superheroes never kill, except for when they do. But generally speaking, they never kill. They always throw the same supervillains in prison, and they always break out, and then you run through the motions again and again and again, forever and ever. These characters are trapped in an ongoing narrative, and the general idea with the live service game model is to have an ongoing narrative through seasonal updates. Like, in a weird way, it's right there. You know? There really is no excuse for a superhero live service game to fail, because the foundation for the live service model is baked into the DNA of superhero storytelling. So why isn't the live service model working for these superhero games? Well, there are 2 key factors here that the developers and publishers have royally screwed the pooch and the gooch on. Number 1, comic book mythology and gameplay mechanics. Or, in other words, it really feels like the people working on these games don't give 2 squirts of rat piss about the characters and mythology that they're working with, and are just slapping generic Destiny-like mechanics into live service games with comic book characters built around it, as opposed to building a game around these characters. Case in point, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. The core team is made up of Captain Boomerang, Deadshot, Harley Quinn, and King Shark. All radically different characters with different abilities and skill sets, so they should all feel unique in some kind of way, right? No, instead they all just jump around the map and shoot guns.
Whack.
And I'm not even saying that method can't work necessarily. Like, for example, a stealth-based Suicide Squad game inspired by Metal Gear or Hitman or something like that, where you have to carry out assassination missions and use different guns and weapons that are inspired by the larger DC universe. That could be really cool and fun. Like sneaking into Santa Prisca and killing Bane's personal butt boy Bird. But he's like an officially recognized political leader now, and he wants Santa Prisca to be recognized by the United Nations, but they have ties with Cobra. So you have to kill him, and you do so with an ice gun, so it looks like Mr. Freeze or Captain Cold or the Icicle carried out the assassination. Like, I don't know, you can have fun with it, but that's what you do with a Suicide Squad game. The whole thing with Brainiac invading Metropolis and the players zipping and flying around the map while fighting waves of Brainiac drones, that is what you do with a Justice League game. Because that's what people want, right? Like, you think that's a no-brainer. And that brings me to number 2. The curse of being out of touch and simply not knowing what people want. Now, there is something to be said about not giving the people what they want, but instead giving them what they need. And from a creative standpoint, I understand that. But it also helps to be self-aware enough to know when your head is so far up your own ass, you can start to smell how rancid your shit actually stinks. Because in the case of Gotham Knights, for example, which I actually think is a pretty fun game when you aren't wasting your life making Venn diagram charts comparing it to the Arkham games. And while I'm at it, dare I say, actually does certain things better than the Arkham games, like the combat feeling more akin to costume vigilantes with high-tech weapons and armor, as opposed to Captain America tapping into the Speed Force when you hit free flow focus. I also think that Gotham Knights has a better open world Gotham City than any of the Arkham games. Gotham City and Gotham Knights is probably the closest representation of comic book Gotham City that we've ever gotten in another medium. Also, some of the live servicey features, like responding to ongoing crimes and picking up clues to solve the overall mystery of the game, and that giving you points to upgrade your gear, like, for the most part, it was actually pretty good and felt like reading a comic book. But what cut this game off at the knees was that Warner Bros. Montreal made a Batman game based on arguably one of, if not the, most iconic Batman story in the character's modern mythology, and you couldn't play as Batman. Like, this is what I'm talking about when I say out of touch. And I didn't talk that much about Marvel's Avengers here, primarily because I already did a video on that game when it came out, but a lot of my points still stand. The story is trash. The characters are trash. It feels like it was written over the weekend by somebody who watched a couple MCU movies and then skimmed Wikipedia for character bios and Marvel lore. That's how lazy that shit feels. And everything else about the game feels lazy too. Namely the gear and cosmetic system, which, quite frankly, I said this in my review for the game and I still stand by this. Everything Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix were going for was already done and almost nearly perfected with Injustice 2. You want to level up your character? Get better gear. The gear has both statistic and cosmetic functions, and you can unlock gear through either grinding, loot boxes, or just straight up buying the gear through microtransactions. Like, these two games are doing the exact same thing. It's just Injustice 2 did it a lot better. That's why nobody really complained about the gear system in Injustice 2. Because it was well implemented into the game with the Mother Box system. Not just like some obligatory Destiny 2 bullshit. And I guess the point that I'm making here is, make a game that people want to play. People don't want to play as the Suicide Squad and publicly execute and humiliate their childhood heroes who are voiced by the actors who brought them to life for an entire generation. And even among the edible weirdos who do, I'm pretty sure they'd like for the characters to have unique playstyles instead of the Deadshot who boomerangs, or the Deadshot who sharks, or the Deadshot with a PG-13 OnlyFans. And nobody wants to play an Avengers game where you have to grind for 300 hours to inch your way through a battle pass to unlock alternate costumes that are otherwise locked behind a $15 paywall. And then have to do that 5 times over with every other character in the game. And of the few masochists out there who do, I'm sure they would, at the very least, want the Avengers to feel like the Avengers and not like fanfiction-fueled, hollowed-out caricatures of the Avengers, in a campaign that honestly feels more appropriate for the X-Men rather than the Avengers. And nobody wants to play a fucking Batman game where you can't play as the goddamn Batman. Jesus Christ. In high school, one of my teachers always used to say, common sense isn't common. And as a kid, I got it, but like, as a joke. But the older I get, the more that shit resonates with me, and I do not like it. But all of this to say, this live service model can work. And it can work with superheroes. In fact, I would argue that it should be able to work with superheroes. And the fact that nobody's been able to make it work is actually very weird, and that's why it's funny. And I know that I'm championing the hyper-corporate, anti-consumer great Satan of gaming here, but as things are, this looks like it will be the future of gaming, whether we like it or not. But I genuinely do believe that it can be done well, particularly with superheroes. And again, it's funny that it hasn't. But those are just my thoughts. But what about you? Let me know down below in the comment section. And as always, until next time, take care, guys.